it kind of brings everything to a close with the ending and the intro tied together. I mean, only thing I'm gonna mention is like here's some addendums to the games themselves, the game itself, and I'm probably gonna talk a little bit about the summarizing what exactly happened and how you're actually supposed to do it. Oh, and this kind of ties in with well, the gameplay is one. One of the thing I also forgot to mention in yesterday's review was that the gameplay is really, there's some really cool things about it too. I actually do have to give credit because like you're actually given cues, visual cues to observe things, and like although at first you're kind of when you're thrown in, like let's use an example here. When you're thrown into this room, you're not sure, but you don't know what to do, and you don't know what would have been yellow dots. But then you walk across the mirror, and like you can see yourself, and you're a silhouette this time, and you talk to the mirror, and then you find out yourself, and you investigate, and there would have been white things. And I always thought that was pretty cool. It has a pretty good first-time user. We call it in gaming. We call it the first-time user experience. Basically, how a new player is introduced to the game's mechanics, and then I like how they use that opportunity to teach you about the investigation mode that you see here, where you try to decipher things in each room. But anyway, so I'm sure all of you are wondering, like, just how are you supposed to figure out the story? You saw the playthrough, and we were all really confused at first. But the actual thing you're supposed to do is, if you think about it, you're supposed to, all of the scenes were numbered. And if you put the scenes in their numbered order, you'll rediscover that it's actually in chronological order of how things actually happened back then. So using this chronological order, you can have a better idea what the story's about. So if you put the notes like did you notice like this scene was scene number 60? So it's like the beginning was red. And so it happened from a lot. This is actually very, very late in the chronological timeline when BD was this old. So, okay, that brings me to what actually happened. So from scene 1, it's about scene 1 is actually the confession of Masiel Kelim, who basically said that I was the one who set fire to that house, and I tried to rob the Vectors, and his fire killed everyone except for BD's father, Mr. Vector, that is BD's father, and so eventually, let's see. So anyway, so basically that's why this idea of a Zebra was hatched. Basically, it's related to, remember that in the story they talked about the theory that criminals beget criminals? So basically they decided, like, you know what, let's do this. Like, we need to make people forget about crimes that have happened. And so they brought in people who were affected by crime into Zebwell itself. And you know, there was some description about what happened at Lasha, about like how people in Lasha would have this adult coming of age ceremony for boys, and they would take this, like the tobacco that Lasha is famous for, and smoke it, and then they would forget what had happened the day during the ceremony. And so this is the Lasha tobacco is very similar is kind of the medicine that was given to BD. Okay, now I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Yes. So anyway, we'll keep going for now. And let's see. So the next thing that happens is, like, do you wonder why, like, BD was talking about her father, and she said she was very young at the time, and that was before her father, who is Mr. Vector. You realize there's two crimes, as of course there's Masiel Kelim's crime, and then there's the second crime committed by BD's father, Mr. Vector. Mr. Vector was the one that she looked at the news earlier, like she looked at the news, like let's see, no, I'm sorry, excuse me. And that's what happened. And you remember how let's see. How Mr. Bector so Mr. Bector decided to take revenge on Masiel Kalim for like what he did to him back then, did to his family back then, and that's why he ended up in jail. And Beatty wasn't able to see him again after the straw hat was the very last thing she received from him before he committed the crime and went to jail and was thrown in prison. So let's see. Let's see. And like Beatty, of course, there's some random memories of her, like with her father, she remembers. And of course she watched the news where Kanaria Kelim was the... Oh yeah, and incidentally, her father, like Beatty's father, killed the entire Kelim family except for one person, the youngest child, Kanaria Kelim, who was only 6 years old. And Beatty, of course, sees the news that she's woken up, and she said, and Kanaria Kelim has identified the criminal. Unfortunately, I believe that's what got Beatty's father caught, because he was caught with a big burn, and they had evidence to prove that he had killed people in the Kelim family. And remember that very uncomfortable scene where Beatty had photographers asking her really, really annoying questions. She was a kid at the time, and she says like, that's why she hates that scene so much, and like she didn't want to be told about all these things, and he was told to apologize, and it was not even her fault. So her father was arrested that day. Let's see. The other thing is... Oh, and remember that cat that died? It was not her fault, but she was bullied because she was everyone knew that she was the daughter of the criminal Bector. So the kids decided to cruel people decided to kill that cat and use its blood to say murderer on the thing, just to accuse her of being the daughter of a murderer. And so that's why she lived alone. In any case, but now Beatty herself is going to become part of the experiment that her father, her mother, and I guess the 50-year-old man, and Masiel Kalim apparently, like what they had come up with. Basically, they made that Zebwell this utopia, so to prevent people so people would go there, forget themselves, and be able to forget their memories of crime and be able to have a new life. And so remember that contract that Beatty was told to sign as a little child? So she was there to before that, there's other things I should mention. And also Beatty has that, I mentioned it earlier, but Beatty has that memory of being in the abandoned house and playing. So it turns out, and so she was actually playing as herself as Dr. Xian. So she believed she would imitate what Dr. Xian would do, and that's what she did, because she had no playmates, but she wanted to become like the Dr. Xian she saw on TV. Anyway, Beatty is given a contract, and of course Beatty's mom doesn't want her husband to die. So Beatty's given and they also want to do this thing where Beatty forgets her childhood memories of seeing her father commit a crime. So she was given a contract to live in Zebwell, and in exchange, and if she lived in Zebwell and forgot her own childhood and had her childhood memories erased, Mr. Bector wouldn't be executed, and he would have a lighter sentence. And of course, Beatty would be living with her mother in Zebwell itself. Of course, before she goes, Beatty remembers going to the graveyard with Masiel Kalim, and of course her mother says that's why her mother says, "Oh, it's not your fault. It's because she wanted to make sure that her daughter knew that it was her father was the one that killed them, it was not her fault." And this is all before they go to Zebwell. And so they go to Zebwell. and the red silhouette, or excuse me, and then like let's see, and of course she's told like it's all right now. So if you're wondering how did they erase BD's memories, remember that little scene where she talks about that bottle with sawdust. And so that bottle contains the little, like the things they were sprinkling into her food. So her food always tasted pretty sweet, and she was wondering why. She always said, I always remember my food being really sweet all the time, and I don't know why. But it turns out that was the medicine that was causing her. It was made from the lasha tobacco, so it's causing her to slowly and slowly. Remember that lasha tobacco is made from the roots, so she was slowly and slowly forgetting her own, let's see, her own memories because that tobacco was taking effect on it. And of course she didn't know she was taking it. It was just in her food. Let's see. And of course there's some scenes with the Gate of Zebwell where she's like, you have to remember that you are. And of course there's a remembrance that Zebwell was created for the idea that the moon could become the sun or the stars. Basically the idea of a new life. Let's see. Anything else? And of course, there's some fond memories that are a little bit not related to the main scenes, but they're just her own fond memories with her mother giving her the dress, and of course, the library. And so, Beatty would often go into a room, go into this room in the library, and that's where she found out. She heard about the Kellen family and the. But by the time, like, you can tell she's kind of forgetting some things from the past at that point. And also those books were kind of placed there so that the player could understand what was the theory behind doing all this stuff, like, about the criminals begetting criminals, and if we to erase their memories, they would be fine. And of course, she read like some notes by the other people that were involved in that experiment. They're saying like, well, Bechter was studying so much about like that kind of stuff, and eventually that kind of almost drove him to become himself, be a self-fulfilling prophecy where he was a victim of a crime himself and eventually became a criminal himself. Let's see. And finally, we fast forward to Beatty's current age, where she's like an older girl now, and she's not young, not a kid anymore. And so that she heard about the murder that escaped from the radio, and that was her father escaping jail. And her father made her way here. You see this knife over here was what her father was going to kill her with. And the blood on the floor is his own blood, because while he escaped, he apparently taken a lot of injuries. And so he originally decided that he wanted to kill her to end the cycle of like criminals begetting criminals, because that was the answer he came up with while he was in jail this entire time. And so, but eventually he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't kill his own daughter. And that's why he goes over to the library and just decides to sits there because he realizes he can't do what he wanted to do in the first place. And so Beatty goes over there and discovers it and says, "Father?" And then her mother comes in and is like, "No, you gotta leave." But she still hears what they talk about. They say like, the father says like, my answer was to kill her, but I couldn't do it. And so I was going to end the cycle, but I couldn't do it. And so that's why he eventually Beatty says like, I need to know this is what I really want is. And then Beatty's father is killed, but we don't know who did it. It might have been her. It was probably her mom, but it could have been Beatty herself, but I don't know. But in any case, it would make sense that her mom might do it, because now Mr. Bechter is a threat to his own daughter. And as she said in the little scenario we saw, she wanted a world that is safe for her daughter, and she'll do anything for that. And Mr. Bechter became a threat to her daughter, so she took care of him, unfortunately. And that's kind of sad, but that's just the way, I guess, a mother's love, right? It's her own flesh and blood. Now, and of course, after that, they're worried that BD has a possibility of recovering of her memories, and BD's mom basically, that 50-year-old guy was one of the guys that came over, and he's just like, hey, he's like, well, it's too bad about him. So in the end, BD's is still BD. He eventually just fulfilled it, basically proved his own theory, and he's just like, well, the plan was a success. We proved the theory. Basically, he was just like, oh, BD's dad basically proved his own theory, and so the plan was a success. But of course, like, there's always the worry that she could recover a memory, and that's like a flaw in the system or whatever. Let's see. Either that or BD was the one that killed her dad, and basically they're like, oh, she's a criminal now, and she's fulfilling her dad, the theory of her dad, and she remembered or something. I don't. That you could see it that way. That's deliberately ambiguous. In any case, her mom is just like, she's had enough of this whole thing, and she decides that they need to get rid of those people, all those people who thought of this messed up plan to scrooge with people's memories. And so BD's mom kills the 50-year-old man, the other guy who also knew of the plan, who also helped to do the Zebwell thing. And that's why she becomes a fugitive with a huge bounty on her, 3 times the average salary of a citizen in Zebwell. And that brings us to here, where we are in the game. Basically, in this present time. Basically, BD and her mom have gotten out of Zebwell, but all BD does now is go into that abandoned shack in the middle of the woods, where she used to play as a child. And she's using the Dr. Shan persona. She was only being the Dr. Shan persona the entire time, and she only could remember. All I remember is red, because she was just too traumatized by the whole thing. So in the game, you notice that her mom kind of played along with it. Her mom actually was the customer who walked in, and she played out that episode of Dr. Shan's TV series that BD had saw word for word, in order so that BD would go into that mode where Shan was slowly trying to get her memories back. And they used the playphone to like pretend that she was that person on the other side of the line. And that's where the game comes in. And eventually we figure out all those memories thanks to Dr. Shan, and finally BD finally gets the courage to remember everything she forgot. And so now she has her complete memories back. And they decide like, and that's why they decide like, oh, are we gonna get, should we turn herself into the police, or we're gonna get caught by the police, or should we just go? And of course BD says like, of course we're gonna go. We gotta escape to the far reaches. For it was basically like, I choose freedom. No more of this charade. And that's how the game ends. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the summary of how the game went. The most ambiguous part is just like who killed BD's father. We're never really explicitly told, and you're supposed to take it one way or the other. To be honest, I mean, it's very possible. Both are very possible. In the end, like the end result, it's the same. BD's father is dead, and that was very traumatizing for her, and that's why she sank into that state of mind where she needed a Dr. Shan to appear. So, at the end, you notice that the Dr. Shan persona that she keeps in her mind is sort of like her safeguard. And he says, like, maybe one day there would be another opportunity where I have to bring out memories she's forgotten. But in the meantime, I'll keep them safe. And it's kind of like her memories of that are strong memories of that are like her guardian angel in the deepest reaches of her heart. To kind of like play like how memories are like, they're just put away in all different kinds of places, like the game represents that, where they're all in different kinds of places, but you just have to go find them, or you just need a trigger to bring them out. And Dr. Shan himself, the Dr. Shan persona in BD's mind was the trigger. Yeah, so hi Illusion Queen. Did you hear any of the explanation? I'm afraid that I just finished explaining the entire game just now. No, it didn't take that long to watch the epilogue. I already watched it. And I already just basically I was talking and summarizing exactly what happened. I'm sorry if you came in. Did you hear any of what I just said about how the game? I literally finished explaining the entire timeline of the game. I can do a really quick one. So recap. Yeah, it's okay. I'll just recap for you. So the really short recap is that. So Beatty's father, Mr. Bechter, was a victim of a crime by Masyalt Kelim, and Masyalt Kelim came out of jail, said like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm gonna atone for my crime because I've done a really horrible thing, and that's why the theory of, well, you know, criminals could get criminals, so we need to prevent that from happening. But Mr. Bechter, long story short, Mr. Bechter basically proved it. He himself, like some time ago when Beatty was really young, committed a crime, and he was thrown in jail, and Beatty suffered for it because everyone said, "You're the daughter of a murderer. Your father killed Masyalt Kelim." So unfortunately, Mr. Bechter became the prime proof of his own theory. And after a long story short, there was the proof. Beatty was then given the contract to go to Zebwell, so she could have her memories erased, so she wouldn't become a criminal, because that's what they thought the theory was. And lots and lots of things happened while she was in Zebwell, but in the end, her father escaped. One day, her father is like, after many years of being in jail, and Beatty grew up to the current age you see her right now. Her father is like, you know what? I think the answer to my theory is I gotta kill my own daughter, because if I don't, I'm just gonna that burden of crime is just gonna pass down to her anyway, and this is the only fail-safe way I can ensure that crime won't happen again in my family. And so he escaped from jail. He got really injured, which is why all this blood is here. He thought about killing her. He couldn't do it, so that's why this dagger is dropped over here. And her blindness is fake. She's not blind. Like, that's a lot. Like, she just thinks of herself as being blind. But she's not blind. Have you noticed that she could see in the end? Yeah, she was confused about that. She's not actually blind. Because there was no incident where she was blinded. Like, that didn't happen. And anyway, the present time is where she hears about what her father was planning to do, and she goes over, confronts her father, and then we don't know if she killed him, which would be basically another proof that the theory is true, that a criminal can get someone who can do a crime, or if it was Beatty's mother who did it, which is also a possibility, because Beatty's mother would determine, well, her father might be a threat to my daughter, and I have to protect my daughter at all times. So those are the two possibilities, and the most ambiguous part about the game. But in the end, after all this happens, the 50-year-old guy, who was also part of making Zebwell this utopia full of people erasing their memories, and so they wouldn't commit crimes, like, she kills him too, because he's in on this plan. She's tired of, she doesn't want anything to do with it anymore. And she kills him, and she gets a bounty on her head for killing him, and that's where we are in the game, so that's why they escape. Beatty did not kill the 50-year-old. Beatty's mother killed the 50-year-old. Because Beatty's mother knew, Beatty's mother was one of the people that knew about the plan, and she knew what the 50-year-old guy was trying to do, and she didn't agree with it. So, and she just wanted out of this like charade, or like forcibly removing people's memories. And like, yeah, she wanted out of it. And that's why they were on the run. And then they chose, like, Beatty goes back to that the Beatty you see who's playing Dr. Shan in the beginning of the game is actually in that abandoned room in the middle of that abandoned house in the woods near where she used to live as a little kid, and where she would play as Dr. Shan and pretend to be Dr. Shan. That's what she was playing. That's why she can't remember what she was playing there. She's like, what did I play there? But the real truth is that she was pretending to be Dr. Shan. She was imitating a psychological clinic because she loved that series so much. And the reason why I'm repeating myself again, but the reason why, like, and BD's mom knew about this, and so she entered the room. She went along and pretended it was an episode of Dr. Shan, the very episode that she knew BD had seen, and that's how they trigger BD to remember her own memories. I have a more detailed summary. I'm just decided to do a real recap for everybody, but the longer summary is earlier in the broadcast. So with that, I think we're done. I mean, the only thing like I would have said that I didn't say in the review is that the other thing I would have appreciated is the ability to see all the scenes ordered, or and have it so that I had something in the menu to scroll through all the scenes in order, and so that way I could determine what had happened. Because the problem is, like, the game expects you to assumes that you know that the scenes ordered numbered are generally in chronological order, but you're not given that information, so you're kind of given everything in a varying order. You don't know what happens before what, and so you're really confused at the end. But if you put them all in the order, then it makes a lot more sense, and that's how people figured out the plot, because I had to look at summaries of every scene I had seen, and then I came up with, like, I kind of figured out what had happened. And so that's another weakness of the game, in my opinion, but I think maybe it might be a deliberate design choice to keep it that way, so that you would actually think of revisiting the game at one point. Anyway, I think that's it for now. I think I've gone on long enough. If you missed the summary, it will be posted to the archives, and I hope that everyone enjoyed this game. I really did, and I really recommend you to play the English version or play the Chinese or Japanese version if you have a good enough grasp of the language, so to speak. The other thing I'm going to mention is that, once again, we're doing Paper Mario on Monday. I have actually tested the game